Okay, so welcome to this podcast, to this interview. Today I have got Alexandro. So I met Alessandro through his YouTube video where he was practicing 28 languages. I was quite impressed, and so now I want to pick his brain on language learning. So there, he's on the other line. And on the other end of the line, so this show is sponsored by bensonhall.com, bensonhall.com/audio, where you can learn languages effectively. So, well, without further ado, let's get started. So, Alessandro, how are you today?
I'm fine, I'm fine. And you, how are you?
So, I am doing great too. So
Good.
today is
Thanks
the
for having me.
great. It's an honor to interview you. So today is the Saint-Denis Festival in Paris. So it's the best I can do in terms of Lois level, but it should be fine. Okay, so tell us something about yourself, please.
About myself. Well, I've just turned 18 because I was born in 1997, and well, I'm half Italian and half Dutch. My father's from Italy, my mother from the Netherlands, and I live here in Brussels, so in the heart of Europe. As a result, I already had like three mother tongues when I was already very young: Italian, Dutch, and French. And then, so I think it was quite easy for me to learn other languages because of this background. Do you want me to
Okay,
continue, or
yeah, please. So briefly share your sort of highlight the main languages that you have learned over the years. That would be good.
you want to know all the languages that I have studied so far?
Yeah, so they are in the YouTube list, but then maybe, or you can either you can read out the 28 in sort of a tongue twister style,
Okay.
or you can just highlight the one that you want to share.
Okay, well, actually, on the video I posted on YouTube, I was speaking in 28 languages, but of course, I don't, of course, claim to be absolutely fluent in all these languages. When people ask me how many languages I speak really at a very high level, I usually answer like 5 or 6. And then, of course, there are some other languages that I have studied to a quite high degree. So I would say that I'm quite serious in about 4 or 5 other languages. If you want to know the names of my languages, first, the 5 languages that I speak really very well, I'd say that those languages are Italian, French, Dutch, English, and German. German, because it's really very similar to Dutch, is almost the same. And actually, I think that seeing these similarities between languages is really very important because it makes the process much easier. And so afterwards, I started learning some Spanish, and it was so similar to Italian that I didn't really have to put so much effort in it. And so I learned it quite quickly. But I don't really practice it very often, so that's why I consider like Spanish to be a language I have a quite strong basis in, and I could really speak in Spanish, but I don't really speak very often. But I mean, if you hear me speaking Spanish, it's perfectly okay. And then I started learning some Portuguese, and I'd say that my Portuguese is quite good too because, well, 1 month ago I went to Brazil, so I had the opportunity to practice it. But now I've got more of a Brazilian accent, whereas before, when I just studied the language theoretically, I had a Portuguese accent, a European accent. And I actually started learning some Portuguese when I was in Macau, so your home city, because, well, my father often goes there for work. He's a professor of political science, and there is an institute for European studies there in Macau, so he often teaches there. And, once I had the opportunity to speak some Portuguese with some of his friends, and that was actually the moment when I started learning Portuguese. And then I also speak some Russian because like 4 years ago, I met some Russian friends, and then like I wanted to be able to communicate with them in their mother tongue, and I was quite attracted to that language because in movies you hear people speaking Russian, and it was quite interesting. And so that was actually my 7th or 8th language, something like that. But my big error was that I thought that like Russian would have been as easy as German when I started learning it, and actually it wasn't like that at all, because I learned my German in a very interesting way because I wanted to make categories and so on to kind of structure my language learning. And that was not really a good idea for Russian, because Russian is extremely irregular in the sense that well, for instance, when you learn declensions, well, the accent can move according to the case. And so I was a bit lost at the beginning. I thought that like the language was absolutely impossible because I kind of could not break the code of the language, whereas I had been able to do so when I studied my German, because I did it in a very systematic way. And so I kind of thought it was impossible, and my method for learning languages gradually shifted towards a more practical way of learning them. So I just kind of now when I start learning languages, I don't want really to learn the grammar as a pure theoretical subject, but rather be able to communicate with the people. So I'm going to use methods like assimil more often, because I think that they're better to understand how to be able to speak with people, to understand the real the collocations and so on, more colloquial speaking, and that's I think it's more efficient at the beginning. Then of course you have to resort to some grammar books, because otherwise you can't really speak in a very consistent way. And I think it's important to find an equilibrium between these two sets of methods to learn languages. Okay, so
Cool.
I could go
Yeah.
on.
So, in particular, I'm interested about you because I was born in Macau. How long were you in Macau?
Yes, I've been to Macau like 5 times in my life, something like that. The first time I
In
went there,
total, how much time?
more or less a week every time. And the first time was in 2004. I think I was 6 years old, and I thought it was quite an interesting city, because you see the mixture between Chinese culture and European culture, and that's really fantastic. Like, I don't know if you know about this statue in the center of Macau, and it is a kind of what's the right word to describe this? Syncretic. It's a syncretic statue, because you really see the mixture of the two cultures, and I think that's amazing.
Cool. And sort of, let's see. Okay, so between Russian and Chinese, which one do you find more difficult?
Well, actually, I know for me, because I'm a speaker of European languages, Russision would be a bit easier, just because it's an Indo-European language, even though it's actually quite difficult if you come from, if you speak I don't know, an African language, it will probably be easier to speak Chinese. So in absolute, I'd say that Chinese is easier, but for me, as a European speaker, Russian was easier, because I could infer some similarities, and I could make lots of links with other languages I already knew. But Chinese grammar is extremely easy, of course. The only difficult part, in my opinion, is the difficult pronunciation, the system of the tones, and writing, of course, because you have more or less 50,000 characters, so that's quite difficult, I think. But I really haven't really had the opportunity to practice my Chinese that often. I hope that maybe next year I will go to China and stay there for a month and practice it, because I think that when you really kind of stay in the country where the language is spoken, you get to speak it much better, because as a matter of fact, you're going to kind of think in that language, and that's, in my opinion, the point where you feel that you're really improving in the language.
Cool. So, I'm always very curious about the language learning routine of each sort of polyglot. Could you share your routine, if there is a routine, how regular it is, or how
Okay.
has your language routine evolved over the years?
Well, first and foremost, I actually start learning languages because of something that happens in my life. Like if I meet some friends that come from a particular country, I'll maybe feel like I want to learn their language, because I want to communicate with them better. If kind of I see a movie on TV and I'm quite interested in it, I might consider learning a bit of the language, because I think it's quite interesting. If I go to a country, I will start learning the language. So there is always a kind of practical purpose when I start a language. But sometimes I do happen to kind of learn a language because I think it's really very similar to other languages I already know. So it's more of a kind of passion for languages, a passion for seeing the links between languages, because that's a very satisfactory experience. I don't know if you've already noticed that when you see real links between languages, you feel quite well, because you feel that you're going to learn the language very easily because of these similarities. And so that's actually at the beginning. So I would usually go to a kind of bookshop and start reading some books and so on. But I wouldn't really consider buying them at the beginning, because, well, I think you shouldn't really waste money. So just buying all kinds of books, you really have to think about whether you really need this language. And sometimes it can just be a kind of hobby, and then you do it for the sake of it. And then sometimes I just go on the internet, I start learning a little bit on my own. But really, when I start being kind of serious about a language, then I would really definitely buy a kind of grammar book, a vocabulary. I would consider making a vocabulary notebook and so on. And so about my routine, I would say that I don't really practice languages every day, and it's a shame in my opinion, because I'd really like to, but you know, I was in a quite difficult school for 6 years. I mean, I was quite good in that school, but I really had to work really a lot. So I kind of maybe worked 10 minutes or 20 minutes a day on my languages, and it could be anything, you know, from Russian to Spanish. Maybe sometimes I practice 3 or 4 languages a day. And when I'm on holiday, then it's absolutely the opposite, in my opinion, because I really study like 10 hours. Sometimes I go to a bookshop, I stay there the entire day, because I'm really interested in seeing those links between languages and so on. And I really want to learn my languages. So I'm not really very regular in language learning. I do it when I feel like doing it. And I think that's quite important. You don't need to feel like obliged to learn the language, because if you have some kind of stress, then it's not going to work in my opinion.
Yeah, I do agree with you. I mean, if it starts to feel like work, then it can lose the fun, because the motivation is intrinsic.
Language teachers experience this all the time, because, you know, especially in schools, pupils are kind of forced to learn languages, and sometimes they don't really see why they're doing it. I especially noticed this in Belgium here, because, you know, I was attending a French-speaking school, and all people didn't understand why they had to learn Dutch, because, you know, it's a second language here in Belgium, but they really can't see why they should learn this language. They don't see the purpose and so on. They'd rather learn like languages like English or maybe Chinese, and that's quite a shame in my opinion. But of course, the educational system can't do anything against this. It's up to the individual to understand the purpose of doing something. And I think it's very important to find a meaning to everything you do. Even when you're forced to kind of do something, you have to find a meaning, because anything can be useful in your life. Otherwise, you're gonna like live your entire life just waiting for things that should happen, but they will never happen. So it's a bit of a shame. That's what I think.
Cool. And so great. So which language has your attention recently? Or which languages?
Recently? Okay. Now I'm actually a bit working on Japanese, but I'm really a beginner. I'd really like to speak better, and that's why I'm learning it. But I feel that my Chinese can really help me for the written part, because you know, they use Hanzi, so it's quite similar. But they call them kanji, of course. And then some other languages I'm quite interested in at the moment are African languages like Swahili or Lingala at the moment. So I'm trying to get kind of familiar with those languages, but I haven't got so far anywhere so far. You know, so I'd really like to practice them. It's quite difficult.
Yeah, I can hook you up with a few people to practice Swahili. It's not. Yeah. It's quite difficult. It's quite difficult to find, but I can send you some information.
Of course, it is.
And then, so yeah, I mean, I've tried to learn Swahili as well myself, being one of our minority language. I studied at SOAS, which is one of the best language university in Europe, and well, I only studied 4 terms, so didn't go very far. But yeah, I love the language. I've been to Kenya before for a few weeks, where most people go to there to want to go on safari and stuff. I actually wanted just to practice my Swahili.
Yeah, very interesting. I know.
It's lovely.
A very interesting thing I noticed about Swahili was, you know, when I was a child, I really liked The Lion King and so on. And I just noticed maybe 3 weeks ago that like Hakuna Matata means no problem, or that Simba means lion and so on. So I'm quite interested about the language, because I discover lots of things Well, I understand the real meaning of some things that I already knew, and that's quite amazing, I think.
Yeah, okay, so just for the listener, Hakuna Matata comes, so ha is the negation, kuna is to have,
Yeah, exactly.
in a way,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then matata is the
Already a
plural
bit
of
familiar
problem.
with that, but I wouldn't be able to speak the language really.
Okay, so without turning this into a Swahili podcast, let's and other questions. So, how do you maintain all your languages?
Well, I have quite a lot of books. I've got them just here on my right. If you want, I can show them to you.
Why not?
You'd be amazed. So here you see them. They're quite a lot, actually. So I usually have a go through my books whenever I feel like doing it, because I think it's important to practice, of course. Otherwise, I feel I'm forgetting things, and it especially happens with Chinese because it's such a different language that if I don't practice it very often, I really feel I'm losing it. It really happens with tones, because if I forget the tone, it doesn't mean anything anymore. So that's why it's quite important to practice, I think, and you can consider this for any language. If you don't practice it, it's not going to work. And I feel that there are some languages that become more important for me because I use them more often, like English or French and so on. And I kind of I don't know, taking the place in my mind of other languages I'd like to speak to, like I don't know, Chinese especially, or now I feel that I don't really practice my German as much as I would like to. So yeah, of course, I have to find the opportunity to use those languages. And I think it's very important to travel abroad for this purpose, but I don't do it very often, as much as I would like to, at least. I mean, I've been to lots of places, but sometimes I go to places I already I go to places, the language of which I already know, so that's quite a problem sometimes, because I'd like to kind of learn some other languages, even though it's important to kind of develop your knowledge in the languages that you already know quite well, to speak them really very well. You have to find an equilibrium between kind of improving the languages that you're already quite good in, and the languages that you'd like to kind of bring to a higher level.
Cool.
Yeah.
So, if you are to encourage our listeners or people who are watching this video, what do you think? What top 3 tips would you share to jumpstart, to accelerate our language learning efficiency from right now?
Okay, so 3 pieces of advice. Well, first I'd say you have to give meaning to what you do. You have to kind of have an objective in your mind and stick to it. Always think that even if it gets quite hard when you study, you have to think about this objective. You have to imagine yourself using the language with people who really use this language. So that's really important in my opinion, because otherwise it's going to be too theoretical, whereas languages are not theoretical normally. You know, languages are a way of communicating with other people, and that's something you should keep in mind. Then second important thing is practice. If you don't practice, it doesn't work, of course. You can't think that you're going to learn a language very well because you study 7 hours a day, and then for one day, and then afterwards you stop for like 3 months. It's not going to work, in my opinion, because there is a kind of Latin proverb that says that you have to forget a word 7 times before you're going to remember it. And I think it's quite true in this case, because you have to really be regular in your studies. Otherwise, it's not really going to be very efficient, and you won't kind of reach this level of proficiency. And then third, let me think about a third piece of advice that I could give to listeners. You should, as I already mentioned before, you should try to find an equilibrium between kind of grammar on the one hand and more practical kind of aspects of the language. You shouldn't really prioritize one over the other. And I noticed myself that at the beginning I was really kind of emphasizing grammar and so on. So everything I said was really very, very good, absolutely correct, but it wasn't really the way people would say it in a real conversation. It wasn't really the way native speakers would express their opinions. So I think it's important to find an equilibrium to kind of speak like a native speaker to think like a native speaker, because there are different points of view according to the language you're learning, and then you have to kind of express them in the best possible way with the right grammar. That's why it's absolutely important, in my opinion, to kind of consider these two kind of perspectives to language learning.
Okay, so in summary, actually my mind went blank. So meaning, practice, and equilibrium.
Practice, and then equilibrium between grammar and more practical purposes and so on. You know.
Okay, so in the second part, we will be switching to various languages. But before that, I'm actually very curious about your experiment of this YouTube video and then doing social media promotion of it. And then you may have TV exposure.
Yes, TV is going to come.
Coming soon. Could you share that? I'm so inspired.
It's okay. In about 5 minutes, they'll be knocking at the door.
Okay.
Yeah. So, what do you want me to talk about? Like about?
So yeah, when did you have the inspiration to make the video? Okay. How have you been just posting
actually, at first, I noticed that there were quite a few polyglots that used to post their videos on the internet to kind of get more exposure, to be kind of known among the community. And so I thought it could be kind of interesting to do this too. But I mean, I could have done it already 3 years ago, and the reason why I didn't do it is, well, partly because I wasn't really good at manipulating IT objects and so on. I just got my first computer in 2010, if you want to know. And the second reason is that for me it was really a passion and so on. I didn't really want to be known and so on. Now if it happens, I mean, it's okay, because I feel that I'm really getting in contact with a kind of community of language learners, and that can just be kind of beneficial to me. So I think it's a positive experience. And well, of course, now I'm trying to advertise my video and so on, because I really feel that I could kind of I can just win in this story. You know, people are going to help me to learn languages more easily. Probably I'm going to make some friends when I go to other countries. So I kind of will have the opportunity to practice language more easily. I think that's quite important. It's a nice experience anyway.
So it's like a team donor experiment, really.
Well, I did see his video maybe about 2 years ago. Yeah, it was quite inspirational for me, because I mean, he did it even earlier, like 16, and I think I could have done it at 16, but maybe I would have spoken maybe, I don't know, 15 to 18 languages, something like that. But well, now I know 28. Well, I say 28 because those are the languages I can kind of communicate very simple ideas. But of course, I told you I'm in different levels in all my languages. Some of them I speak them really very well, and some others a bit worse. I'm more of a beginner.
Okay, so so when did you post the video, and how long was it from the video to now the TV, one of the biggest Belgium TV coming?
Yeah. Well, actually, I posted the video last Sunday. You know, it was the 27th of September, and I just got in touch with the TV this morning. Actually, they called me and they said they were quite interested in interviewing me, because it was quite impressive to see that somebody could kind of learn all these languages. So I mean, I'm looking forward to meeting them, and we'll see what it's about. It will probably
Great, you have invited me to make my speaking and languages as well. It is being uploaded, so I have got a Benson who is speaking 6+ languages.
That's really nice.
So I will do more. I will do more. Some of them have been so dormant. Some of the other languages are just sort of dormant. I can't even say.
Many of my languages are dormant too, but I mean, that's because we're humans. You know, we're not like computers who can memorize all different things. And I think we just have to practice to bring them back. But it's always good, because if you've already got the basis, then if you kind of happen to go to countries where the language is spoken, you're going to absorb it much more easily. Everything's going to come back. I think it's you shouldn't really undervalue your dormant languages.
Okay, so before we move on to the second part, so I will post the link to your video, of course, but any other, how can people find you via Facebook, via Twitter,
Yeah,
or
they
which handle do you want to share?
can find me on Facebook. So Alessandro Telò with an accent on the O. They find my picture. I'm in Rio de Janeiro, so it's quite easy to find near the beach and so on. It's quite nice. I'm really kind of ready to kind of accept lots of friends on Facebook and so on, because it can just be beneficial to me.
Great. So let's now move on to speak a few languages. So languages that we have in common that are not dominant in me. So Spanish, French, and a bit of Mandarin.
Okay.
Shall we?
What shall we start with?
Yeah, I've got just for some of you random questions. So maybe not necessarily language learning. So en español vamos a hablar un poco en español ahora. Me gustaría empezar con ¿cómo es un día perfecto para ti?
Día perfecto?
Un día perfecto, exactamente.
Yo diría que no existe un día perfecto porque tenemos que tener una variedad en los días que vivimos. Y, por ejemplo, a mí me gustan los días de vacaciones cuando solamente puedo estudiar un poquito de libros. Y a mí me gusta cuando por ejemplo, me voy a otro país porque así puedo comunicar con el idioma más eficientemente con la gente, y etcétera. Pero también quiero trabajar y sentir que estoy evolviendo en la vida, y por eso yo pienso que sea importante yo diría estudiar, y por lo menos ahora porque estoy en la universidad, he empezado, diría que empecé hay 2 semanas, y ahora yo tengo que estudiar. Así hay 2 tipos de idiomas, de días diferentes, yo pienso.
Okay, so let's now switch to some French.
Français, vous voulez parler français? Ça va?
Ouais, parler français, ouais, parce que bon, je suis assez à l'aise en français maintenant parce que j'habite ici quasiment 2 ans et t'es là-bas depuis très très longtemps. En Belgique, tu aussi, c'est un écho français, c'est ça? C'est un écho francophone, c'est ça?
Oui.
Donc,
Enfin, maintenant j'ai terminé, mais avant j'étais dans une école francophone ici à Bruxelles, donc, et oui, j'ai fait toutes mes études en français, donc jusqu'à mes 18 ans, et donc on va dire que c'est une langue que je parle extrêmement bien, parce que évidemment j'ai parlé à l'école avec mes amis, etc. Quand je me balade dans la ville, je parle uniquement français, donc oui, on va dire que c'est une langue que je parle extrêmement bien maintenant.
Donc, oui, qu'est-ce que tu vas étudier à la fac ou est-ce que tu as décidé?
J'étudie l'économie maintenant, parce que j'ai pas uniquement envie de parler les langues comme ça pour passion, mais j'ai envie aussi de les utiliser. Et je pense que c'est assez important donc d'avoir des idées à communiquer avec les langues. Les langues doivent être au service d'autres passions comme la culture ou comme le travail, etc. Et donc c'est pour ça que j'ai pas décidé d'étudier uniquement les langues, même si j'aurais bien aimé, je dois le dire.
Ok. Et donc, tu viens de commencer le cours à la fac, c'est ça?
Oui, c'est bien ça. Je viens de commencer il y a 2 semaines, et j'étudie en anglais en fait. Donc ça c'est assez intéressant. Euh, voilà, il y a en fait au départ je voulais aller étudier en Angleterre, et j'ai été pris d'ailleurs à l'université de Bristol, mais j'ai trouvé que c'était quand même assez cher par rapport à l'éducation, par rapport au ranking. Vous voyez, parce que j'avais été pris à Bristol et c'est par exemple 27e au monde, donc je me suis dit que c'était mieux d'y aller pour le master dans un pays anglophone, etc., comme les États-Unis ou comme l'Angleterre. Et donc pour le moment, je suis encore ici en Belgique, à Bruxelles, et je fais un programme en anglais d'économie à l'université qui est flamande au départ, la KU Leuven, vous connaissez peut-être. Et le programme est en anglais, donc c'est pour ça que j'ai trouvé que c'était pas mal. En plus, ils sont 55e, ils sont classés 55e mondiaux par le New York Times. Et voilà, en plus, pendant la troisième année de bachelier, il y a la possibilité d'aller à l'étranger pour un programme Erasmus. Et je trouve que ça aussi, ça pourrait être une expérience très enrichissante. Donc c'est pour ça que j'ai décidé de faire ça. Et puis le prix est bien évidemment bien plus bas parce que la Belgique est un pays où la sécurité sociale est très développée, donc on paye uniquement 800 euros. Donc c'est pas mal.
Ok, très cool, très cool. Oui, en fait, ouais, je travaille dans une banque aussi, donc ouais, j'aime bien
Ah. À Paris,
l'économie.
donc. Vous travaillez à Paris.
Ouais, je travaille à BNP à Paris.
Ah oui, c'est très bien. Il y a des BNP Paribas aussi ici en Belgique, partout évidemment. J'ai même un compte là.
Ouais, ouais, c'est n'importe où, ouais, ouais, c'est ça.
Ah oui,
Et donc, quoi d'autre? Donc, oui, une autre question que j'aime bien poser, c'est
allez-y.
que c'est qui est qui est une personne assez inspirante pour toi. Si tu peux dîner avec une personne bien connue, ça serait qui?
Ah, en ce qui concerne les langues, vous voulez dire, évidemment.
N'importe quoi, les langues
Oui, oui,
ou,
oui,
euh,
je vois.
ou
Euh,
une personne célèbre,
oui, oui.
politique.
Attendez, laissez-moi penser, laissez-moi réfléchir. Moi, je dirais que des gens que j'aimerais bien rencontrer sont des polyglottes que vous connaissez sans doute très bien. J'aimerais bien, comment dire, partager ma passion avec les langues, à propos des langues avec eux. Il y a par exemple Richard Simcott, que j'ai déjà en tant qu'ami sur Internet. Il y a aussi Timothy Donner, que vous connaissez sûrement. Il a posté une vidéo. Bon, lui, il a évidemment mon âge, donc on pourra peut-être bien s'entendre. Mais voilà, moi, je pense que ce serait intéressant de se rencontrer comme ça. Il y a aussi Alex Rowling, vous connaissez peut-être Rowling, je ne sais plus son nom exactement.
Ouais,
Luca Lampariello sur Internet. Voilà, ce sont des
ouais.
personnes que j'aimerais bien rencontrer, évidemment, parce qu'on a une passion en commun. Enfin, ça pourrait être une rencontre intéressante, à mon avis.
Cool. En fait, oui, j'ai rencontré tous ces gens. Par exemple, oui, il y a un truc qui s'appelle, il y a un événement qui s'appelle Polyglot Gathering.
Ah
Là,
oui,
c'est en Berlin. Oui, je suis allé où j'ai rencontré Alex Rowling
pardon,
et
c'est-
Richard Simcott. Et
Mhm.
aussi, il y a mais Luca Napariello, j'ai rencontré par Skype avant. Et il y a aussi un truc qui s'appelle, un atelier qui s'appelle Polyglot Workshop. Et là, c'est assez cool et c'est pas cher. Et je suis allé dans un atelier d'apprentissage de langue il y a 2, 3 mois à Londres en juillet.
Mhm.
C'était avec Richard Simcott, Alex Rowling et Ollie Richard.
Ah oui, je vois.
Et
Très intéressant,
c'est
c'est
pas, ouais, je recommande ça. C'est pas cher et
ah oui, mais ça pourrait
c'est,
m'intéresser aussi. On verra si un jour j'ai la possibilité d'y aller, j'irai sans doute. Voilà.
ok, cool. Et donc, maintenant, un tout petit peu chez nous en mandarin,
通话，
pourquoi pas?
普通话，
普通话。
怎么样？
那你学了汉语学了多久？
多久？我开始学中文，我已经学中文5年了，可是我不我不常学中文，我觉得我更常应该学中文，呃，而且我已经去过中国5次了。我去过北京，去过上海，也去过澳门，你的城，我也去过香港，可是我觉得，为了提高我的汉语的水平，我应该到中国去学习，比方说我应该去嗯。医院，因为不然的话，我不能学很多。
嗯，好，那你感觉汉字难吗？
对，可是我不练习，我不常练习，我差不多认识呃千字，可是 我觉得我应该练习因为我现在不认识字很好，我觉得写字很重要，那就我可能要练习我不知道以后我觉得这个呃有可能有意思，可是我现在不知道，我要写，可是how to say try actually in Chinese because I'm trying to express this idea since about 10 seconds, but I don't know the word. If you could learn it, if you could teach it to me, it would be nice.
尝试，
看写，我要看，
尝试。
我要看写，写，我要更常开始写字。I don't know if my sentence was okay, but I think that Chinese is quite a dormant language in my case because I don't really practice that often, and I really noticed that when I go to China, I really speak it much better.
那你在比利时有中国朋友吗？
对，我有文熙是一个中国人，他他中文说的很好，那就我们很常一起说话，可是我觉得我的中文不太好，那就我应该到中国去学习。
好的，好的。So yeah, so these are the languages that we said we would practice, but I'm really quite curious to hear some of the other ones as well. I know that you are not, maybe some of them can be quite dormant, but just sort of say something, maybe just something different or similar to what you have said in the video. For example, maybe a little bit of Japanese, just a little bit, just maybe some self-presentation, doesn't matter, and then.
I told you my Japanese was really very dormant, and I've just started, so I can say some basic sentences.
Yeah.
私はAlessandroです。私は日本語が少ししか話せます。But you see, it's not really very good, but I'm trying to kind of bring it to a higher level. And that's quite difficult because it's totally different to other languages.
Okay, so yeah, I can help you with a little bit of Japanese. Yeah, we can keep in touch. And so we have got a few minutes, and I actually want to pick your brain on a few more language learning questions. Is that okay?
Okay, that's perfect.
Okay, so yeah, something that I've been struggling a lot is Slavic cases. What has been your experience so far? I mean, you mentioned that you find it quite difficult and irregular. For example, for one single noun, how do you remember all the cases in different situations?
All the cases, you mean for declension?
Yeah.
Yeah, declension. Well, actually, I started learning Chinese. I started learning Latin at school about 6 years ago. I did 6 years of Latin, and I think that really kind of taught me the structure of the system of declensions, and that helped me, for instance, to learn some German and some Russian for lots of languages, and then also for lots of languages that have similar systems like Polish, but I'm not really very good at Polish, and then other languages like ancient Greek and so on. I did some ancient Greek at school, I must say, but well, I stopped after 2 years because I was so much interested in the language that I studied everything on my own. So you understand, I think it's quite good to learn basic languages like Latin because they're also very good for your general background, for the spirit of citizenship and so on, to know about history and so on. And so I think that they also help you to learn languages that are derived from Latin, like Spanish, Portuguese, and many languages that have similar structures, like German, even though it's not derived from Latin and so on.
Okay, cool. And then, but then Yeah, I mean, personally, I have studied a few work studies only at the surface level, various language of cases as well, but I do find that the Slavic case is particularly difficult. It's just, I don't know, maybe they're just quite different from all the other ones that I have studied. How do you remember that? Because most people, most polyglots advise just to sort of learn a lot of sentences with different cases in them, and then eventually we'll pick them up. Is that the approach that you take, or do you take a more deliberate approach to do certain to do more drills and or maybe to use something like a flashcard program, memorize, Anki, etc.
Okay, I don't think it's really good to learn to learn languages by just kind of memorizing sentences by heart, because you have to break down the language system. You have to understand how every language works, how what the structure of that language is. So, for instance, for languages like German, it is essential to understand the system of the cases, because if you don't learn this, you won't really be able to communicate any idea. And this is even more true for languages like Russian, because if you don't know the system of the cases, you're not going to get anywhere so far. And I think, and so it's very important not to learn, anything by heart, but sometimes it can be useful. Like if you want to learn some colloquial expressions and so on, the only way to do so is to learn it, to learn the entire expression, because so you're going to kind of feel like a native speaker, because it's going to be more spontaneous in a way.
Cool, cool. And then yeah, so but then yeah, for me my Polish learning journey is still quite I think you take quite some time. I mean, certain languages are just harder than other one, well, especially coming from either, well, for myself coming from English and Chinese linguistic background, it's sort of quite
Yes, of
difficult.
course.
And then and other questions that I'm always interested in is how to improve what's it called, listening skills by radio and television. Do you sort of make notes on words that you don't know, or you just sort of go with the flow?
Well, I'd really like to take notes, but I can't do that all the time. Sometimes I listen to Al Jazeera, the Arabic television, and I hear some words that like I'd like to memorize, but I haven't got a piece of paper all the time at hand, so it's quite difficult to do so, even though I'd really like to, and I feel that it could really be beneficial. So I think that if you have the opportunity to do so, you definitely should do so, because it's going to help you, because you hear languages in context, you hear how words are used in their context, and that's extremely important in my opinion. But otherwise, well, you can do the same like with some language books, because sometimes they have a kind of CD. So if you listen to the sentences, you hear how they're used, and that's, in my opinion, important to get used, first of all, to the pronunciation and then to the context. So that's what I would advise.
Great. Okay, and then in terms of vocabularies, you try and learn all in similar to what you said is to the Slavic sense question. So you always like to learn them in context as
Yes,
well.
I think it's very important. Sometimes I even prefer learning a word in context than getting the simple translation of the word, because languages are very different. Of course, you can't really think that you're going to learn a word because you know the translation of this word. You have to be able to use it in a sentence.
Mm.
When I started learning German, I wouldn't just learn a word in its translation. I would always learn, if I learn like a noun, I would always learn the genitive case and the plural form, because I know that if I have these two forms, I can kind of how to say, know all the forms of this word. I know all the declension of the word. So I think it's very important to be able to use it in a sentence effectively, because if you aren't really able to use it in a sentence, it's the same as if you didn't know the word at all. I think that's quite obvious.
Cool. And then in terms of language exchange or practice, do you use HelloTalk, or do you find people on other language exchange websites, or they are sort of in your social circle somehow in Brussels?
Yeah, I'm not really into learning with computers and so on. I usually try to speak the language with people I meet and so on. So usually they're quite impressed, because people, well, if I meet like somebody from India, they're not quite used to finding someone who speaks some Hindi, even if I just know some words. You know, I wouldn't say I speak Hindi at all, but actually they're immediately got impressed, and that's, in my opinion, quite inspiring, because you kind of want to go further, because you see that you're quite good at it, so it makes you more confident. And I think that's very important when you have this contact with people, because you understand that the language is not just theoretical, but it's actually a way of communicating.
Yeah, the way I see it is, I do exactly the same thing. I know my Hindi knowledge is very little, but then I always just say even just a few phrases. Like, I mean, I know very basic, but sometimes just even one phrase of "मैं थोड़ा-थोड़ा हिंदी समझता हूँ," they're quite happy that I can say I know a little, and then that sort of bring. What I really like is to feel that I have given someone a smile, or they just making the day. Just some Chinese guy,
sometimes
trying to
you can kind
speak the language, because very few people do that, and it's just general being just very much appreciated. So, and then just sort of sending someone a warm fuzzy feeling to the heart is something that really sends me a warm fuzzy feeling as well.
Of course, that makes you want to learn the language even further, I think. And even if you don't know a word quite well, if you use it at least, then maybe they're going to correct you. So it can just be beneficial to you. You have to try to use the language as much as you can. You shouldn't just keep quiet, you know. That's what I think.
Yeah, I mean, especially since I started doing these interviews in form of videos and podcasts, I've also been trying to do that more actively, trying Nepali with the people who sell bananas in front of the train stations, and then here in Paris, lots of people speaking Vietnamese and certain Maghreb Arabic dialect, so sort of want to sort of just pick up a few words as well. I mean, I think everyone, well, 千里之旅始于一步. Journey of a thousand miles begin with one step. So
I think the RTBF is there. The Belgian television is arriving. So that's
I'm actually quite curious to sort of say hi to them. Do you think that will be okay?
Come here. You can say hi to them.
Okay, great. And so that I can have my...
Of course, try to be natural. Try to be natural. They're arriving. So let's just keep on the conversation.
Okay, cool. So, yeah, something else that has... Okay.
Yeah, so they've just arrived here. You can say...
Great.
Il y a un Chinois qui veut vous saluer.
Okay, so we can switch to French a little bit. Okay. Or it's just English a little bit. So just to some context for the listeners, so maybe you can catch the early beginnings. So from the video 1 week ago posted on YouTube after a couple of thousand views, now we have got one of the biggest Belgium television coming to interview Alessandro, my new friend.
Ok, ça c'est juste un micro. Vous passez par ici, à l'intérieur. Par ici, à l'intérieur de la chambre. Oui, je vais prendre le pied. Oui.
Et puis je le mets où? Je le fais monter comme ça?
Oui, c'est ça, exactement.
Wait a second.
Ni hao.
Ni hao.
Ah oui, il parle cantonais.
Ah oui, il parle cantonais.
Mais il parle aussi mandarin.
Ah, mais on veut vous entendre, hein?
Oui. 你是广东人，你说广东话？
对呀，我说广东话。你会说一点广东话吗？
我就知道，雷猴可是我不说广东话。你会说普通话吗？
我会说普通话。刚才我就跟你说普通话。
你在学校学普通话，是不是？对，我基本上我是在伦敦的时候，我在伦敦的帝国理工大学读大学，在那里有很多中国的学生，然后呢，我就跟一个朋友，就是他叫鲁汉涛你好，然后我就跟他练习很多的普通话。很好，你现在普通话说得很好。
谢谢谢谢谢谢。
很好。
不过我的普通话基本上都是在英国学的。
我也要学广东话，可是在必须我不知道人会说广东话，这是问题，你知道。
Okay.
很好。
Okay, so in the last 5 minutes, can I teach you one phrase in Cantonese, and then maybe that is also my promotion of the lovely Cantonese language, if it ever goes on to the recording.
That's fine.
Is that okay?
Yeah. What do you want to teach me?
Okay, so just so this is a chance for me to do a small plug as well. So if you want to find a free tool to learn English, French, German, etc., come to bensonhoi.com, bensonhoi.com. Okay, so that was a shameless plug, and then so just a simple phrase to say I love learning languages in Cantonese, and then if we have got, well, we've only got 4 minutes left, so let's try that. So it's very similar to Mandarin. So I is o.
Oh, okay.
Oi.
Oi, like I in Mandarin.
我爱语言是语音。语音。我爱语音。
Phonetic alphabet at the moment, but oi 语音 and then.
Yes, that's it. 我愛語言. Okay, so it was a very lovely interview with you, and I am sure you have inspired our listeners and
of course,
and then people watching these videos, and then hopefully, and then you will soon be inspiring most people in Belgium as well. So, any last minute?
Sorry, can you keep on talking?
They'd like us to speak some Chinese.
I've got some. I've need some more picture.
Okay, yeah, we can speak.
Thank you.
Okay, so Chinese and French. What language?
中文。
中文 ，OK。
很好。
OK，那就是说中文吧。你喜欢吃中国的食物吗？
食物。
吃东西，中国的中国餐。
中国餐我很喜欢中国餐。我在北京已经吃了烤鸭，你知道？可是我不太知道，我不太认识广东餐。我就知道广东米饭。你知道吗？米饭。
我知道，当然知道。我也很喜欢北京烤鸭。
你很喜欢很好。那就我大概去年到中国去，就我会去北京烤鸭。很好。
我也很喜欢吃北京烤鸭，因为我也是，我上年去北京，很喜欢吃烤鸭。OK， 那你喜欢中国的女孩吗？
中国的
女孩，女生。
女生中国的女生很好，我觉得很好。我喜欢。
中国的女生也好，中国的吃的东西也好，我也是当然了，因为我是中国人，当然我也非常喜欢中国的东西。那再问你一个问题，关于中文的，那你感觉就是要学习中文的话，你有什么样？你可以有什么方法最好学习中文？
学习中文。
方法。
你要知道怎么样我学中文？
是的。
很好。我这儿有很多中国本，你要看 这个我的中文盘，那就我差不多每个星期看书，可是这个很比较难，我觉得因为我也应该学别的语言。How to say language in Chinese again? It's like
语言。
语言 so I was almost right. 语言我有很多语言我要练习，那就这个很难。
May I ask you?
Of course.
Hello?
Hello.
I'm from the Belgian public television. I'm a journalist.
Wow, I'm very happy.
Well, how do you find his Chinese?
He's at I would say at intermediate level. We haven't spoken for that long, so yeah, I would say he's sort of at intermediate level, sort of B1 level.
Yeah, because Chinese is a totally different language, so that's why it's if I don't really practice my language, then I can forget everything. I remember that maybe 2 years ago, my Chinese was very, very high because I had like 1 week of intensive course in China, in Macau, your home city. And so I remember that I knew like 2,000 characters, and that was my first moment for Chinese. It's kind of dormant. Here you are.
What about his pronunciation and the language?
我的发音怎么样？
你的发音非常好。So I feel that Alessandro's pronunciation is very good. It's actually, I would expect his pronunciation to be coming from someone who has lived significant period, amount of time in China. So knowing that he has only been there for weeks in total, so it's it's really quite impressive. So yeah, I feel that he's very effective language learner.
Are you impressed?
I was very impressed when I first watched his videos a few days ago, and that's why I reached out to him. And then so yeah, so I have got I've started a podcast to interview very successful language learners. For example, just to give one plug to one of my friends, Tim Keeley. I feel that he is one of the most multilingual person on this planet. He can lecture in 9 languages, and he's conversational in 50 languages. I think he can certainly be our next candidate for your interview.
Okay. Thank you very much.
That's nice.
Okay, cool. So so any last minute message for our listeners?
I already explained like 3 pieces of advice I had. So the first one is to give meaning, of course, to everything you do, to the languages you learn. You have to kind of imagine yourself using the language. Then it's, of course, practice. This is my second piece of advice, because if you don't really kind of practice every day, it's kind of more theoretical, and you have to kind of keep up to date. That's quite important, in my opinion. And the third thing I mentioned was to keep kind of equilibrium between more colloquial speaking, more kind of and grammar. Of course, you have to kind of find an equilibrium between your more theoretical approach and the more practical aspects of language learning. That's, in my opinion, quite important.
Okay, I always like to end it with a sort of an acronym. So we have got PAM. So practice, equilibrium, and meaning. So that would be sort of one way to remember your wisdom. And yeah, so if you want, so for our listeners, if you want to hear more inspirational podcasts with inspirational podcasts, so please subscribe to the YouTube channel as well as the podcast, and then you will hear more inspiration. So the last word is to live with passion and to learn a lot of languages and to communicate with the world and to make the world a better place.
Okay.
With this, I will say bye bye and to let you get on with the interview.
再见，再见，
再见，
再见，很好，
au revoir，
再见，好不好？